at
Bang
random.
on the fucking
Yeah.
glass, right?
The other thing I love about junior hockey, yeah, I love the crowd at junior hockey games. It's so much more fun than pro hockey games. And like there's more kids, there's more loud people. Um, I remember like probably you ask people like what's the most common chant you hear at a junior hockey game, and it's usually coming from the kids, and it's usually fight, 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 fight. Not that we don't, I hope we're not sending the wrong message to children, but that seems to be something that really gets them going.
And at the crowds at NHL games, I find focused. The crowds at OHL games, I find observant. So because of, there are more kids and more families, there's a lot more looking around at, each other and who else is sitting and what are other people doing. And I think that has a lot to do with just the fact that they're younger people on the ice too. So there's just a little bit more of an immature feel to the atmosphere than you would find at the professional level. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of looking around, there's a lot of watching. And when you go to an NHL game, you're sitting there, there's a lot of focus on who the stars are on the ice, and trying to make sure you don't miss a play, right? Trying to make sure you don't miss that one big thing that happens during this game that's being televised live that you're sitting at, right? Whereas at the OHL, I mean, there's lots of other things. There's gimmicks, there's hot dogs and T-shirts and stuff that are more grounded. So there's a very different atmosphere also, to it, and also the fact they're playing in smaller rinks, right?
Oh yeah,
Rinks that are half the size. So it's more conducive probably of being able to be more observant because you don't have such a big space to look around where, not everybody looks like a little dot.
yeah.
You can actually look around you and still see people,
Some of
So,
my favorite rinks in junior are the smaller ones. Like I love the Peterborough Memorial Center. Um, I used to go to Generals games a lot as a kid, and I miss the old arena. They have the Tribute Community Center now, of course, for quite a while. But what I would give to see them play in the old rink again. I mean, I used to love Maple Leaf Gardens. Growing up as a kid, and I remember like the problem I have with in not just in hockey, but in most pro sports, but especially in hockey, is that like all the new arenas are great, but I just find them a little too cookie cutter. Like they're all kind of
yeah.
the same. And baseball, I think, has done a good job of preserving some of the oddities. And some of those parks, of course, a baseball field can last a lot longer than a hockey rink. But can you imagine the outcry if, they said, okay, we're going to make Fenway, it's going to have regulation, distances in the outfield. We're going to get rid of all the oddities. And like part of the fun of that was just the uniqueness of every stadium. And so like I kind of missed that in hockey. I think some new rinks have done a good job of trying to preserve that. Like I look at Chicago, they brought in the old pipe organ from the old Chicago stadium, and they even with the lighting, they made it look like it still cast those shadows on the ice, even though like people say, why would you do that? It doesn't look as bright. Well, it's a little bit of a throw to nostalgia and how it used to be. So I kind of miss that I wish more teams would really focus on some of that history and try to bring it back, even if they're in a new rink.
So what were some of the old ones? So you had Chicago Stadium, I think is what it was
I
called.
love Chicago Stadium. Yeah, just the story, like the shadows. The organ was just deafeningly loud. They say you haven't lived until you've heard the national anthem at the stadium. Just it's so loud and everyone's so into it, and all the little details too. Like I heard that there's like a long set of stairs that the players have to go up to for the visiting team to get to the ice, and it's just the intimidation factor. You're in like one of the loudest rinks in the league. It's dark, and you got to climb these concrete stairs up to the ice, and everyone's yelling. Like it's just every little detail just adds to that.
That's hockey, right?
Yeah.
There was the Odd in Buffalo.
Yeah, so you have Boston Garden, like so some of the rinks that were smaller than regulation, I guess they were 85 instead of 100, and Yeah, so that kind of added to that whole like the physical element too. The players knew they had 15 feet less space to hide, so to speak. So
Yeah.
you're going into a game against the big bad Bruins, and it could be a rough. So they built their teams to because of that. I think they deliberately said we need to get a good physical team here. And yeah, the odd again just the whole character of it was, and it wasn't just the rink, it was the crowd too, right? Like the
Hmm.
Buffalo fans, you'd always hear about the fights in the stands. And I know when you were talking to Arjun on the last show there, you were talking about soccer and some of the fights there.
It
But yeah,
defeats the purpose of the actual sporting event, in my opinion. Like you're
yeah,
having a sporting event so that the whole purpose of the match, the sporting match is so that people can compete and
yeah.
compete head to head without promoting violence, right? Like
And you've got this whole sideshow going on in the crowd.
yeah, like what are you like you obviously well, you don't get it. You don't get it, or you don't want to get it, and you're not there because of the game. So it's obvious that if you're going to fight in the stands, either something really bad has happened and like somebody has really gone out of line, or you're not there for the game, because the whole point of the sport is to get rid of physical violence in a manner where it's threatening to personal safety. It's so that people can compete. And so yeah, those stories, dudes. And I think now that you mention it, I had forgotten hearing about the stories of the fights in the stands at the odd, right?
Yeah, I think that was one of the rinks, and actually I think in Buffalo there's still the occasional fight in the crowd, but certain cities have that reputation, of course. Philly, of course, always has the reputation for the crowd being tough on people.
Well, let's do this. So then there was the forum in Montreal,
Montreal, yeah.
Maple Leaf Gardens.
The Forum was an amazing rink. I mean, what a culture, what a history, That's where, as a kid, I actually saw my first NHL hockey game. That was pretty cool. So you can imagine at the age of 11, um, so this would have been in 1984, October 84, I went for my 11th birthday, my first hockey game. It was a preseason game, the Edmonton Oilers at the Montreal Forum. And so my
Cool.
parents had friends who knew someone who worked for the NHL. So they let us into the rink in the morning to attend the practice. And so I have all these memories of like interacting with the hockey players. Like I remember Charlie Huddy pretending to high stick me through the glass and smiling at me and just all
Wow.
this cool stuff. And me and my brother were running around picking up all the pucks that had gone into the stand. And we're kind of on the other side of the rink. And my mom yells like, "Hey kids, Wayne Gretzky's here. He's waiting for you." So like, just a minute, we're getting some pucks. And then about 10 minutes later, we make it over. The rest of the team had already changed and showered and we're ready to go. And there's Wayne still in uniform waiting to meet us. And so we chatted, we did some pictures. And like it's like the coolest, it's every childhood hockey fan's dream, to your first hockey game, you meet Wayne Gretzky. It's at the Montreal Forum. It was pretty cool. But I just remember like the wow factor as an 11-year-old sitting in that rink and just the scale of everything, and everything was so new. Like you'd seen it on TV, but I can't remember if we had color TV yet back then. I think we might have still been mostly black and white, and just like everything was so vivid. I still remember it well, and just like experiencing that crowd live, and the sound of the puck hitting the glass or going up into the crowd. I was like, this is scary. Like you don't really think about that when you're watching on TV, but everything was just so cool about that experience. So whereas today, I would say today, um, I find that the game, yeah, like it's so good watching it at home now with the big screen TVs and high definition and the coverage that for me, like I recommend going to like a few games a year, but I find you can get a great experience at home. But for anyone who hasn't been to a live hockey game, I totally recommend. It doesn't have to be NHL. Go to that junior game. Go go to is it the K-Rock Center? I'm not sure what it is in Kingston now, but go
It's
to
the Leon Center now.
the Leon
Yeah.
Center. That's
K-Rock
right.
Center, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Go to the PMC in Peterborough, like go, check out the 67s. That's a great hockey experience. Like you were saying, it's a bit of a different crowd than the NHL, and I kind of like that about it. So yeah, but if you want to talk old rinks, we could go all day.
Hey, man. Well, yeah. Well, okay. Well, we'll continue. That's a cool story. And so you met Wayne Gretzky at the Montreal in the Montreal Forum.
Yeah.
At the Montreal Forum in the Montreal Forum. And what was it in 1984?
1984. That's right. Yeah.
Wow, man, that's a cool story.
Yeah. So that's like that's right at the prime of his career, right?
Was he a nice guy?
Oh, for sure. Like you hear all that stuff, but this is just like the perfect example. Like here's a guy like who's obviously in demand. He's like the best player in the game, and he's willing to wait like while the rest of his team's already like showered and finished and going back to the hotel. He's waiting for like a couple of kids to walk across the arena to meet him. He could have said, "Oh, sorry, I got to run. I got a tight schedule," or he's like, "No, I'll wait."
Do you still have the pictures?
I do. Yeah, there's like a newspaper clipping because my mom told the story to the Cobourg Daily Star, and so I have a newspaper clipping somewhere. And the headline was Wienhoff brothers meet Great Gretzky at the Montreal Forum, and we joked it should have been Gretzky meets the Wienhoff brothers, but yeah, those were fun times. Yeah.
Well, all right. So Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah. So that's where I watched most of my hockey games as a kid, and that I don't know if you've ever been to the Gardens, but just the history. Last night people are asking, what are you doing now with no hockey? And I'm not really into watching those classic games, but if it's a certain broadcast that I don't know the outcome, or it's in a certain arena or a certain announcer that I really like, so I'll tune in. So last night they had on Sportsnet, they had from 1993, it was playoff game 3, Detroit at Toronto at the Gardens. And I watched it mainly just to sort of bring back some of those childhood memories and the sights and sounds of the Gardens. And I was hooked. The game was interesting, but I was watching mainly just to get a glimpse of the Gardens again. And that was pretty neat.
There was the Spectrum in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Right. You had the Igloo, which was in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Was it Washington Arena? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's been called a few things over the years. What was it? The Cap Center. I can't remember now. It was in Maryland, and I remember the siren whenever they scored.
I've been to a game there. I've been to a Washington Capitals game in Washington. They eliminated the Pittsburgh Penguins in the playoffs, the game that I was at.
Arch rivals, yeah.
Yeah, right, which was a rare thing. But they probably had Bondra and a couple of those guys when that happened.
Oh, okay. So you're talking like mid-2000s probably.
No, even before that. It's got to be a while before that. But I think it was called Washington. Excuse me, Washington Arena.
The MCI Center. I forget what. Yeah.
So, and then what did you have? You had Pacific Coliseum, which was in Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah. And then I loved everything about that. Just again, we're talking late night, like being in the Eastern time zone. The fact that, being a fan of Eastern teams, you so rarely saw any games there that when you did, it was kind of like, oh, what's this? It's kind of a novelty, and like everything from the time. So the games would start at 10:30 Eastern time. So at some crazy hour.